Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. My name is Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Matt Stockbridge, who is a media and marketing effectiveness guru. But before we do, just a big thank you to Lumen Research, the sponsors of this podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye-tracking technology company who are helping brands to understand how human attention is paid or not to advertising, and helping media planners, buyers and brands to plan, buy, measure, and optimize towards real human attention. So thank you very much to the team at Lumen. And Mike, I'm Mike.
Hello.
Matt, how are you?
Mike.
Yes, I won't say hello to myself.
No.
Matt, how the devil are you?
I am very well, very well indeed. Enjoying the opportunity to share this time with you.
Indeed. For those that have been following from the very bitter start, Matt was our very first guest on the podcast back when we were locked down because of COVID and basically talking on a Zoom call.
That's
and then
right.
just cut that and sent it out into Spotify.
Yeah.
So for those super users that Spotify Wrapped told me I have, they might remember that podcast, but
Many, some people.
some quite possibly, yeah. So I don't know. This is going to be, I think we're on about episode number 93 or something like that. So by the time we get this out, we're recording it in December 2024. It'll go out sometime in January. By that time, who knows? There's a bit of a backlog. It might be episode number 100.
That would be very special. Bring
Would
up
it-
the
would it?
century. Well, it would,
Indeed.
because I am a sort of not a very good cricketer, and one of my regrets so far, I mean, there's still time technically, would be to score 100 runs and get a century, and I have
In a
I've
year
done that.
or in an actual game?
Well, in the one innings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I'm not that.
Seems like a
direct.
lofty goal.
I know. My problem is I get into runs into the mid 60s and I get knackered and then I get out.
Yeah.
But then I haven't got to the 60s for a while. So, but if I could hit the ton up,
Yes.
could raise my bat. But I'm just saying. We'll see.
Good. Right. Traditionally, we ask our guests to give us a little bit of a potted history of their career to date. So if you could do that, that would be
Well, we're not going to do that today. Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
A potted history.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And we want this to be, the thing's only about an hour, so we don't want half an hour of me talking about me, do we?
ideally,
Ideally. Okay. So just a short.
Lose a few people.
Okay. Stay with us. It'll all
So
be
I was
worth
born,
it.
and
The
then-
great content is coming. This hasn't arrived yet. Anyway, so I have spent 17, 18 years working in market research for a company called, it changed names a few times. It was Taylor Nelson AGB, Taylor Nelson Softwares, got acquired by the WPP group. And I was offered the opportunity at that point to look for a new role, which was nice of them. They weren't actually concerned where that role was, as long as it wasn't working for them. So that was a surprise or a delight. But anyway, an opportunity. So I spent 17 years agency side, market research inside. And then I got a job at Cadbury and to do an insight data role. I spoke to a few different companies, agency, client side at that point. And Cadbury was the one that just looked like it would be the most fun. And the day I joined Cadbury, we got acquired by Kraft. So that was interesting. So another takeover, and that became a bit of a pattern for my career at that point.
But this takeover didn't require you to find employment anywhere else other than
immediately.
there. No,
Not
which
immediately.
is already you're already winning. at this stage.
winning.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the role that I went there for about a year, and then they said, actually, your role doesn't exist in the new organisation, but we would like you to help us set up a new function looking at marketing effectiveness. Which, being completely honest, at that stage of my career, I had little experience in. I kind of understood the principles, or that was it. So it was very much building it from scratch, learning as we went. So I spent about 9 years at Cadbury, Mondelez, as it obviously became known. And then just sort of prior to COVID, decided to move on from Mondelez to set up my own kind of practice. And so I've been working for myself the last 2 or 3 years, doing a mixture of insight, category, media type roles, interim account management. You can find me on LinkedIn if anyone's got any of that need, particularly FMCG focus, but I'm very broad in that area.
Excellent. Okay, so you've worked for Cadbury. Obviously,
Yes.
we've mentioned that, and Innocent Drinks, I believe, and Hasbro.
Yes. So yeah, Hasbro for the last couple of years. Innocent Drinks, I was there for about. So I'm glad you paid more attention to my CV than I have, which is good. Of 18 months, and also some smaller organisations. I've been working for a year and a half or so with a company called MPM Products, who make quite premium cat and dog food. They make just as much cat food as they do dog food, but it turns out people love their cats more than they do their dogs. So the cat food is absolutely flying. That's very.
Bertie, if you're listening, that's not true. We love you equally to Mitzi.
They don't. And this very ethically sourced. They're a B Corp company, so that
was my dog and cat, by the way. That joke doesn't really work if you don't know what my dog and cat's name was.
I'm not as aware of them, but trust me, he loves the cat more than the dog. So in terms of their food choices, just to be clear, not in terms of petting or anything.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So broadly speaking then, media and marketing effectiveness has been your role for in many brands over a long period of time. And I'm quite interested in that role because it's not one that tends to get the limelight as much as, let's say, the CMO or whatever else. So could you give us a bit of a sense of how you fit into a marketing organization or the media side of a marketing organization? Who would you typically be working with on a day-to-day basis? How would you be working with them? What would they be asking of you? What would you be asking of them? What does that sort of look like?
So when we began so back sort of 10 years or so ago, well, 12, 13 years now, Kraft already had that kind of muscle, basically. They were already doing that kind of work in a number of their brands in different countries. But it wasn't something that Cadbury was really embracing, certainly not really on a global kind of basis, more on ad hoc project type thing. And as part of that sort of restructuring of the organization, they said, look, this is a discipline that's quite good because it helps us to understand a measure of marketing effectiveness and for all of our campaigns that we're doing, help us to make different investment choices. So it sounded very kind of reasonable. And the remit really was that I would be interfacing with, first of all, data source companies, so sales data that we might be getting from third parties or our own sales information, and then working with media partners to get spend and impressions information for digital and so on. But bear in mind, even digital social advertising at that stage was a very kind of a small level. I can remember one of the first projects I worked on was whether we were going to invest in advertising on Facebook at all. Rather than, whether social media. It was very much seen as a step, just another channel. Basically, digital was a channel as opposed to it all working together in a whole ecosystem. So initially was about speaking with the data people in different areas to pull this information together. And then there was different agencies that would do the kind of modeling work. And when we begin, you would look at campaigns over 3 to 4 or maybe 5 years if you had the data. So you just had lots of observations, things to look at. And that's the key with that effectiveness. You just need a reasonable sample size, the same kind of any research, to give you confidence over the results. And then initially, I think you would then, having done all that work, present back to the sort of CMO and the team and media agencies and effective media partners. That's who I would go and see and share the results with them. And the whole heart of that was to try and help us to understand what the results were showing, whether they had additional information we could overlay over the top. So you mentioned with attention data. We didn't have so much attention data back there, but that would be something you could look at to say, well, here's a number of campaigns and the results we can't, on the buy and the creative and so on, we're not necessarily seeing a huge difference, but maybe there's something else in how it was received, or maybe it's attention, maybe it's to do with the timing, maybe something else, and hopefully we were in a very good position at Cadbury in that we had a lot of money to spend and we could have the opportunity to test and learn a lot of different things and try things. I think initially the CMO was probably more interested in just seeing that they've done a good job and the campaigns were doing well, hoping they would then get more budget to spend. So it was a bit of battle in the first few years to try not to...
A little bit of insurance in a way. It's like, oh yeah, well done, you did that was good. Like good things happened after we did that, well done.
It worked well.
Yeah.
Because a challenge for most CMOs is they'll sit around a table So having a C-suite meeting, and the sales director will say, well, this is what's happening with sales. Okay. Here's the guy from the factory talking about, manufacturing, how that's looking and so on. Here's the finance person. People have a bit of a view. The marketing person stands up and starts talking about the latest campaign, what's coming now. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion about it. And you try and say, well, I know you don't like that, but I don't know if that's the best thing for the brand or the part of it. So that I had some sympathy for them, because they've got this constant battle and needed the armory, if you like, to defend the decisions that they were making.
Not everyone thinks they can do the CFO's job, but everyone thinks they can do the CMO's job. Yeah.
Exactly. And also you get, they get sort of flippant comments like, what is it really you do? I mean, surely it's everyone else. It's a creative agency. It's the media. It's everyone else that's doing this stuff. So it is a bit of a battle, but it took, I think what the key thing about it was getting interested in measuring marketing effectiveness, which has its flaws and part of it, but at least sticking to it. And it took a few years before I think we really, as an organization, saw the benefits of it. And I remember chatting to a CMO who'd left the business by this time a few years back, and he was always quite difficult with his presentations. He'd ask questions, he'd be a bit of a pain. And I'll never forget, he said, "Oh, but you gave me one of my best times at Cadbury." And I said, "But you were always like moaning about it while we were doing this holidays." And he said, "Well, no, we've just done all of they've found some extra budget. They've been looking at all the countries they could invest in. It could have been in Germany or Austria or France or whatever. But based on the market mix modeling results you've shared, we're going to give you this extra money to spend, but you've got to spend it, interesting, over the Christmas period." So, he immediately went from, apparently, I mean, I wished at the time I'd found out about that. I could have maybe got a promotion myself, but
there we go.
Served a purpose.
So digging in a little bit into the detail then. So you ingest sales data, use Power BI, I believe, do you not? Like you're a bit of a dab hand.
Oh, now, Michael, now you're just using words now, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
If you haven't used AI yet, which is, I'm impressed.
I have used AI.
Have you?
Yeah.
You've used the
This
word.
is actually AI here. I'm not here, I'm at home.
So I'm using Power BI now, which is just a data visualization tool. It's just for creating dashboards and output and part of it. Yeah. Back when we were doing that kind of work, in terms of like the technical stuff of building models and regression models and stuff, and looking at comparing data, sales data, distribution data over a period of time, looking for peaks and troughs, that was all handled externally, fortunately. Right. Not something I would like.
How would that work then? So you'd brief the external agency, this is what I'm trying to learn, help me learn it.
There's a few, back then, there's a few sort of global agencies who could do this kind of work for us and could do it across multiple countries and categories. And the advantage of that meant the results were quite comparable. And so they were bigger data companies, which would have a part of it that would do analytics kind of work. So some of those were providers of the retail data. So they would buy up data from Tesco, Sainsbury's, Carrefour, or whichever. So they'd already have the sales data, which was handy. And then we would feed them the media data, any other data that we wanted to feed into the model. And then there's other agencies who just specialize in doing that work. And then increasingly now, I am going to use the AI word, there are tools that you can actually use yourself to do those kind of modeling work. Because at a simple level, the way to sort of think about it is you've got a time series, you've got sales volume, and each week, each day, whatever, and it goes up and it goes down, and it goes up and it goes down. And what you're trying to do is lay other time series data underneath, whatever it is, to try and see whether, well, if there's 3 or 4 things peaking at the same time as the volume, okay, they will say that that's causing that to happen. And if I look at that on millions and millions and millions of different data points, hopefully I can get some correlations to say, right, this looks like when this, and this happened, the sales increased. For Cadbury, the context you have to remember is quite low value items, 50p, pound or euro, whichever, and 2-3 million pound campaigns or whichever. So you're trying to shift a lot of bars of chocolate. Now, if you're doing that kind of work and you're selling cars, for example, each car might be 40, 50 grand. It's just different metric is a different thing that you're trying to look at. If you're selling financial services or banking, or it's all the different elements of the modelling depend on the vertical that you're working in.
Yeah, you mentioned the two C's there: correlation and causation. So you can look at a data point where, as I say, recording this in December, for publication in January. So all of the Christmas ads are out there at the moment.
They are,
and you would expect, with no advertising at all, that sales will go up at Christmas because people are buying more stuff, they're hosting, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you make sure that the correlation is actually a causation and it's not just happening anyway?
Well, it's a very good question, Michael. I'm so glad that you asked me that so that I could clear that one up. So the simple way to think about it, illustrated, is that, sales of sprouts, 11 months of the year, we probably don't sell many of them. Sales of turkey, kind of peak at that point. But if there was a national, there probably isn't, but a national sprout shortage, I expect turkey sales to still go up at Christmas. So there's those two things in a model, they would say always one causing the other. Sprouts are up, so therefore sprout sales are completely related. No, they're not. It's just there's two things at the time of the year. So that is what we call seasonality. It's something that will go up naturally at that time of the year. The interesting thing you can do with advertising, ideally, is if you've got some data, and this is actually what we had at Cadbury, you had some years where you haven't advertised at Christmas. Others have, and you can look at the performance and their sales to an extent. You can do some competitor kind of analysis. And then you can look at the impact when you have advertised at Christmas. So if you take out the factors of what was up anyway, and this is the point, what was interesting, when we started doing this modelling work, I was working a Cadbury brand, but also Milka across France and Germany and Austria and these countries. And when we did the first project on Milka, and we saw the results we're getting for media effectiveness, particularly at Christmas, and they were huge. And it was this interesting question about, well, why don't you advertise Cadbury at Christmas? And it's done a bits and pieces on and off for the years, but hadn't really done anything significant for a long period of time. And really the reason why Cadbury advertises at Christmas now is because Milka advertising was very good. That's why that CMO I mentioned got that money. So we look at the results that Cadbury's getting other times. Why don't we advertise at Christmas? So I think actually by that point we'd probably had a Christmas campaign that they could put a bit more money behind than they would have spent. But all you're saying is you've got that peak in sales at Christmas, a peak in sales at Easter or other occasions during the year. All from a marketing effectiveness point of view is you're saying that's an opportunity. You've got to come out with the right campaign and execute it well. And so it's not just guaranteed that you'll do a Christmas ad and you'll see a lot of success. Someone might well ask, why, if I'm going to go to Sainsbury's and Tesco and Asda and Aldi and M&S anyway, why would I need to advertise anyway at Christmas? And we said, well, there's enough discretionary spend that's happening and taking place that it's worthwhile them doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So once so if I really simplify your role, which is probably quite insulting, hopefully it isn't, but basically,
you're slap you in the face.
Yeah, there's two questions that you're trying to answer on a continual basis. Is the first is what happened before, and did it work and why, and then what can we do in the future based on what we learned in the past in order to perhaps make the next campaign even more effective, right? Yeah. So what does that process look like between, I've measured across this campaign across 3 months, but looked at the last 5 years, and we're pretty sure that we've made X amount of money as a result of doing that. So that's all good. So the CMO is very happy that we all did a good job. Well done, everyone. But then how do you then take those insights and figure out how you improve the next iteration? Because Cadbury have been advertising for a number of years before you got there, and probably a number of years after we leave. Yeah, they're quite an old brand, right? So there's a lot of like institutional data that they will have. How do you help the next campaign be even better?
So through the life cycle at Cadbury, at the beginning, it was a lot more backward-looking than forward-looking. There was far less optimization going because people just weren't really used to seeing a metric or an ROI, against a campaign. What does this pay back in sales? And I should also point out that's all we were measuring was return on investment, so effect on sales. But not every campaign is really about a short-term uplift in sales. There's lots of other objectives you could be trying to get to. So we had to take that into account when you were sharing the results. But it's once over a period of time, each year doing the update, going through the previous campaigns, people started to understand, if you take your eye off like the absolute result and look at the picture, like where are the peaks, where are the troughs? Is this better? Is this worse? If we looked at simple things like if you TV advertising, the cost per GRP or cost per points of the campaign. And what was very interesting was to say, oh, well, for example, before we even get to the modelling, well, if the cost per GRP has gone up by 30%, for example, then the effect is going to have to work really, really, really hard. So even before you get to the result, what was quite good as a discipline was just looking at cost, looking at the cost per GRP or per impression or so on. And then what was interesting was then holding partners accountable to that. An example, we started working with Snap in the sort of earlier sort of days. And what they were very, very good at initially was quite short, lenses and so on, 24 hours. Someone could go into this thing, create some nice sort of output and so on. But then it's gone in sort of 24 hours. And they're getting some amazing numbers of engagement over a short period of time. And they were quite costly things to do. My point to them was that and there's a reason for doing that. It was reach an audience and fame and everything else. But what I'm measuring is the impact on sales. So unless there's something in the lens, which is clearly driving people to go and buy whichever product, cream egg, Whisper bar or whichever, then think about it. You've just got 24 hours to get that message across. What are they going to do the following day or the week after and so on? So I'm not saying we shouldn't use lenses, but what other ad products and other things you've got that actually maybe we can amplify it, maybe we can share it, maybe we can do something afterwards so that we can stretch it out, to make the big impact. We used to see the similar thing in TV. So we're going to buy the X Factor spot, or we're going to get the most people at that point. And that has its benefits, but it's if you could afford it, showing it again and the frequency and showing it again and showing it again before it tails off builds up that sort of memory and the muscle memory so that the great Byron Sharp physical mental availability, it's into my head now. I've seen it more than once, not just once on a big occasion. And now when I'm in store, a lot of the work, interestingly, I've been doing, so at that time in my career was a lot of time on media effectiveness. More recently, last year or two, I've been doing a lot more in-store kind of work and category understanding and performance. And it's a shame, really, that the two worlds don't work more closely together, because there's something very, very powerful.
With retail media, that's going to change, right? With the rise of retail media networks.
It can. It's if it's going to be at scale.
Yeah.
So the tricky part of it, again, remember, we've got to shift. We're going to do this new product. We've got to shift 2 million of these bars. So that's a lot of stores. We've got to spread them out. It's a bit like when at Waterloo they did this, and we've got the largest out-of-door, longest screen. It's amazing. It's expensive. Get in there. You're going to reach this number of people, but it's still just Waterloo Station. So unless my product is really targeting people that get the train from there, and I'm going to see that uplift, it's nice, and it's
perhaps an overspend for a specific geography.
It depends. It's not. It costs what it costs, but it's sort of like, well, what are you trying to achieve? So with retail media, you're right. It can be very, very effective. So if they sort of say, well, look, if I'm Asda, for example, and we're going to put these in our, the 80-20 rule, if that exists there, then we can get it into those stores and we can do that at scale. Then you're right. It can really kind of shift a difference. But a few token efforts here and there and some, a showcase store that's doing something fun, it's not going to deliver results at scale for items that are 50p or £1 or 75p.
Well, I spoke to Nick Ashley from Tesco on the podcast probably a year ago now, and we got quite excited about the opportunity of, I'd love to get your perspective on this, on the opportunity of being able to prove the value of brand advertising over time. And the broad conversation that we had was, you could use an omnichannel DSP, let's say, and so, right, I'm going to buy, let's just take one geography. Let's take Epsom, because we're both familiar with the area.
Yes.
So we're going to buy around the Sainsbury's in Kiln Lane in Epsom. We're going to buy outdoor. We're going to buy CTV, and we're going to buy mobile video, mobile display, et cetera, but we're going to target half of the people that we think might buy our product in Epsom and not the other half. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to see how that then comes down the funnel into actually be going into Sainsbury's and using the Nectar card and actually physically buying the product, and we're going to see.
Tesco.
Yes, other supermarkets are available. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I've mixed Sainsbury's with Tesco there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick.
Sorry.
Yeah. So there's a Tesco's in Epsom, right? There must be. Yeah. No, okay. So I've mixed my supermarkets there, but you get the idea. So you can basically tell how much product you sold,
Yes.
And see how much brand advertising there was, how much promotional advertising there was, and how different that was to the control versus the exposed.
Yes.
We served advertising to these people, they bought this much. We didn't serve advertising to these people, or we served only promotional advertising to this group, not the brand. This group, we did promotional and brand beforehand. There was a lead up of brand. So do you think that, how do you think about that from a brand point of view? Because it was, from my point of view, from a media point of view, it sounded like perfect sense, but I haven't worked within a brand.
Yeah. From a brand point of view, it's slightly tricky because what a lot of retailers offer is uplift studies, and they'll have these things to show. And well, if you invest in this in-store media or outside or sampling, there's lots of different things that we can do. All of those things are value and a part of it. The issue really is about, and you'd see this, this principle broadly in media anyway, about at scale. So if you remember broadly before digital really started to sort of get a grip of marketing spend, it's always about reach as many people as possible as often as you can, and that's broad is where we want to go. It doesn't matter if you make cat food, and half the people don't have cats, just reach all to all of them anyway. Okay, because it's expensive just to go to cat owners. Well, okay. So if you look at the point through with retailers, they can say, okay, we can be quite specific here and we can do these stores and this part of it. But for certain manufacturers, it's like, how many stores am I going to have to do that in order for it to really show an uplift in sales versus simply an end of aisle promotion or something else? Because there's other things which might be cost. So your answer is right. If you could do enough of them, you probably would be able to create an analysis to show, well, the brand effect above it, assuming the quality of the creative and everything else is good, is that much better if you do those things. But it's a really expensive way of reaching, of getting quite targeting. And someone else would say, yeah, we could spend that money on that. Back to the point about having a massive outdoor or being in Times Square or whichever. But I could spend this and I'll reach all of the dots. You remember, I was going to make the point about digital. I remember starting to hear about, so you'll say, oh, well, Facebook, you can just target the people you want to reach. It's a 45 to 54, it's homo, it's female, it's this, and you thought, wow, this really targeted approach will be better.
Only people with 8-year-old ginger cats.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Only these people, it's fine. It's a press go, and they're quite expensive, which we'll find them. All right. And then we've done that. And he said, yeah, but if you hadn't, as soon as you start making things quite targeted.
It's more expensive.
Exactly. So the what came off at the back of that was this idea of what we call personalization at scale. So how do we make something personal, interesting, and feel like you're spoken to as an individual, but we do it across the masses? And there's various different campaigns and articles that have done that. So we've got this campaign, there's 5,000 different iterations of it, depending on how you've gone in and going. There's an AI generated version that does that part of it. And that's probably the crossover between it. But in my experience, most marketeers in very big organizations tend to be a bit more risk averse to trying something to prove their point when if they start to see, I know I could do that, but actually the cost of it.
So I'm going to get all adults on TV and just because it's cheaper.
It's cheaper, yeah. It's worked. Doesn't make it right. No. I'm just saying they're pragmatic.
So you've seen a lot of campaigns over your time. Do you think that there are things, so if I was to ask you, again, recording this in December, going out in January, if I was to ask you to look at the Christmas ads that have been on on the TV during pretty much since Halloween finished. Yeah. I think as soon as the clock struck 12 on Halloween, it was like, right, now we can start with the Christmas ads. Yes. But do you start to spot certain trends or themes or elements to advertising where you think, I think that's probably going to be quite effective because you've seen a lot of campaigns at the time and you've seen the back end data?
I think so I have the two things. So I get my sort of personal view, so I'll watch a few, I'll get a few.
I like that. I don't like that.
No, as everyone kind of does.
Jaguar.
Well, Jaguar's very
a few people liked it.
A few people liked it. Lots of people jumped it straight away. It was not a Christmas ad, but it was a good time of the year to rebrand. Maybe if they'd not made it pink, it would have caused a different response. But it certainly caused a lot of excitement amongst the media marketing community. So there's a guy called Rob Mayhew who does nice little amusing videos. His take on it, I think I'd probably agree on, rather than have a very strong opinion for or against or something else. Anywho, moving on to, because it'll be old news by the time this goes out. If Jaguar either completely failed or massively succeeded, and all of a sudden I told you so.
By then, probably, but
might have done. Probably not. So the Christmas, one of the things I think what I realised with them is, even as those, like, you start seeing the Aldi ad, you're starting to recognise it, sooner into the ad than maybe you've seen before.
Why is that, do you think? Frequency?
Well, they're applying all of the great advertising ideas about, frequency and saliency and fluent devices, a system one like to talk about, and so on. But they're repeating it each year, iterating a bit, optimizing, and it works. And it works for a retailer and it works for them. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but it does work for them in the way they do it. Their advertising outside of Christmas tends to predominantly be about how their stuff is as good as and cheaper than everyone else's. And they know they're winning that because at the moment, Tesco, Sainsbury's tend to price match or talk about price matching. So, is the fact that it's the same price enough of a decision for me to not want to go to Aldi? And then every Christmas I can see a nice little campaign and buy a stuffed carrot, and give it to someone. So what I find interesting about the ads now is that I think, broadly speaking, the quality of them is a lot better. If you think going back, it was always like whatever the John Lewis ad is, and I can't remember anybody else's as being interesting and epic and so on. And after a period of time, that kind of epic, lots of 90-second views and bits and pieces, which you don't see any other time, you're never going to be able to repeat that forever. Particularly where, if you think about John Lewis, they're not doing what they haven't got a carrot appearing every year or different parts of it. It's kind of a theme and a story, and some are very memorable and epic, and some are less so. And so everyone else has sort of tried to kind of do their version or do something as kind of part of it. And broadly speaking, they are a bit more interesting to watch than they have been. I would say it's, from someone who works in effectiveness, it's quite nice to see that people seem to be paying attention to that and thinking about creating ads that are kind of interesting and engaging and stuff, and not presumably are delivering results, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, well, we'll find out, I suppose, when the supermarkets put their financial results out in January. We'll see what worked. But talking
who won Christmas?
Who won Christmas? Yes. Yeah, indeed. So Aldi, you mentioned Aldi there. The sponsors of this podcast, Lumen Research, worked with a company called T-Vision, who they have a panel of, I forget the number, it's hundreds and hundreds of households in the UK that have signed up to have a front-facing camera on their home TV, and they basically look second by second at when people are looking at the screen and when they're not. So it enables them to understand when people are in the room, when the advertising is playing, or if they are in the room, are they looking at it, or are they looking at something else? Are they looking at their phone, the family or whatever? And all
do they
the
record it as well?
They record it second by second. They don't record the. It's not like Gogglebox. You suddenly got the fear. Oh my goodness! So you imagine that.
I'd love to get some verbatim comments from people watching it.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But anyway.
No, they don't. They don't. But that's maybe an idea for future. Yeah, that's a whole TV show. That's Gogglebox 2.
Maybe we should
the ads.
That could be
Anyway, that's our new thing.
Okay.
Anyway, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
So they looked at the percentage of an ad that people looked at, in terms of actively engaged with, and Aldi came out top And I'm really interested in why. And I think that the System 1 stuff you said and Orlando
don't say Bloom, because I always say Wood.
I know it's correct. Orlando Wood. I know. Yes. I've met him. He's been on the podcast.
Yeah, I've met him.
But yes, it makes you want to say Bloom, doesn't it? But as soon as you say Orlando, it's so strange. He needs to rebrand. He needs to be. He needs a rebranding job. Orlando, if you're listening. But I've read his books, and a lot of the things that he talks about as being parts of effective advertising appear in the Aldi ad. So it's a story, it's a narrative that unfolds. It's a bit like Mission Impossible meets Christmas this year, but last year it was a different story. But familiar characters. And I like that the characters are also linked to Christmas dinner, basically, Kevin the Carrot, etc.
Exactly.
A familiar story, but told in a slightly more amusing way. There's a few jokes in there. I forget one of them, something about, this suitcase with a false bottom made me giggle. It was like literally a false bottom. So it feels to me that it's got...
worked?
Well, we don't know if it's worked yet because we haven't seen the sales data, but I just wondered if when you look at an ad now, you get a feeling, a sense, having studied campaigns on the sales end, like if you think, that one's probably going to work, that one won't.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I know it's clear that Aldi think very clearly and have a clear process around optimizing, how the ad is put together, what's coming in the story, and all those parts that you talked about to keep attention running. And so they're ticking that box. And as we all know, the more thing is going to be watched, the more effective it is going to be, or has the potential to be effective anyway. I mean, there's a point at which if the advert is just great, it's like a piece of art or something, but I can't actually remember what it was for. And we can all think of ads like that. I love this. We would do lots of research at Cadbury about, what was the Cadbury ad you remember that you really like? And they would often reference one that, hadn't aired for 5 or 10 years, but that was the one that they remember that they liked. So there's attention is, you've got to sort of see attention as like opening the door, to the opportunity. If no one's seeing it or watching it or staying in, I remember there was some we were working on different media guidelines of different channels and so on. And one of the things that used to come up was about, well, look, chances are they're not going to hang on for 20 seconds or 30. So let's get the brand in the first 1 to 2 seconds.
That's the other thing Aldi do. They load those constantly in view.
Let's not build the anticipation to the reveal. And different arguments reveals. Let's just see what it's for, whichever. And also, that point of our memory. So as I'd go back to Milka as an example, we don't see a lot of Milka advertising in the UK, but Milka advertising has been running for a very, very long time, has a lot of very distinctive assets, a lot of a look and a feel that within a few seconds of watching it, particularly a Christmas ad, you would know, this is an advert for Milka. There's Alpine, there's lilac cows, and it's brilliant because it relates to lots of countries have mountains in, so those are our mountains, and you can't quite work out when it is. It's sort of olden times, but a nice time and stuff. The way people are dressed, a bit Heidi looking, and so they play on these things and then iterate around that part of it. Now, someone else might say, well, that's not you need to come up with something new and fresh and different, and that's always a bit of a tension. You do want to, you can get attention by being quite different, but you don't want to be too different that people just switch off. So you've got to have enough to keep the attention going, to keep the anticipation, either through lots of scene changes and cutting and storytelling, or just through an angle or shot. I said I wasn't going to mention it, but if you think about the first time you watch the Gorilla ad for Cadbury Dairy Milk, there's a zoomed in shot and the track is going, and it very, very slowly sort of pans out, and all the time you're saying, what's this for? What's that? Let's see.
Steadying himself.
No, steadying. What's he doing? Is he playing those are drums? And then he said, that was great. And by the end of it,
there's a deep breath as well, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And isn't that? And then he said, it's chocolate. Is it? And then it finished, and then you said, most people, the first time they sit and think, I'll rush out and buy some Cadbury Dairy Milk. But most people thought, I want to see that again, because I'm not really sure what I've just seen.
It's also the best bit of a great track. Yeah.
So it's got those elements a part of it, but it would be quite a brave decision to have an equity campaign like the Aldi ad and have a similar slow zooming out part of it. Is that going to be effective? Maybe, I don't know. It probably wouldn't be. So the point is that you built the attention on that ad once you'd shown it a few times, then it sort of became sort of something beyond a campaign in and of itself. So the first thing is then, okay, we've got the attention, so that's great. And then it's sort of like, okay, is this now a piece of advertising that's gone into my mind, has made me consider when I'm thinking about where I might go shopping when I'm going past, actually, I will go in there. Or have I completely forgotten what it was for? I've just been really, really well entertained. And that can be the challenge. So the attention metric is the key. There's a high probability, particularly for a retailer, that the one with the highest attention scores probably going to have a good Christmas. Yeah, but it's not guaranteed. But
you have to earn the attention, right? And that's what you're talking about. I suppose it's the story, it's the entertainment. Yeah. So the greatest media moment that I never had was in relation to the Cadbury's Gorilla. I was at the time that came out, I was working at a company called Blink TV, who do big screens at music festivals and Twickenham Rugby Stadium and stuff like that. And when the main action isn't on, they use those screens to play advertising. And Genesis had a reunion tour, which was at Twickenham Stadium, and we had the screens there, and I was like, oh, okay, I can't even remember who the agency was now. We have to get the Cadbury's advert up there because obviously In the Air Tonight is the tune. It's a Phil Collins tune, and Phil Collins himself vetoed it and said no, because this is a Genesis tour, not a Phil Collins tour, and that looks a little bit like I'm trying to. I was like, no. Can you imagine like 80,000 people in Twickenham when that ad comes on, and then that would have been brilliant for Cadbury.
It would have. I think had you approached Cadbury with that idea.
Yeah, well, they were up for it. They wanted to buy it. Yeah, they wanted to buy the time, and so I got that bit right. But Phil Collins said no. I feel that's a little bit like it looks like I'm being a bit braggy. Yeah.
Just creative people, mate. It's very difficult to work with.
Very difficult. They work with children, pets, and creative people. Is that the rule? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So looking at the Christmas ads then, and this is going out in January, which is going to sound weird talking about Christmas ads, but which one do you think will prove to have the most effective sales numbers come January?
Who's going to be shouting the loudest? Well, it'd be a bit obtuse for me to say, TK Maxx after having this kind of conversation. I would be very surprised if Aldi doesn't nail it again in terms of business performance, because they're very, very efficient and very effective at what they do. Yeah. They don't tend to like to be preferred to as a German discounter because they've been in the UK for a very long time and the majority of their products are sourced from the UK. But there's clearly a mentality and a process to doing things that is working. One of the key things about retail, though, is that the success in retail is really driven by the number of stores you have. And one of the things Aldi's been able to do, and Lidl, is opening more stores. And the more stores that you open, you get a certain amount of, if you think about geography of an area like Epsom, for example, or there's a superstore there, a superstore. So if there's no Aldi within like 10, 20 miles and you put one in, you're automatically going to attract. This way retailers all over the world work. They look at maps of population densities and so on and say, well, if we put one there, we'll get this amount. And so long as we can afford to put them in, and bear in mind Aldi store, they don't have a super store. They've got a bit of high street stuff, but they don't have massive stores like Tesco have invested in and so on. They're all more or less the same size. 70-80% of what you want to buy they have. It's pretty good quality and you get in and out quite quickly. So that will always be, if you say, why is Aldi successful? It's going to be that stuff. It's consistent, it's good pricing, it's on, it does well. And then there's this Christmas advertising bit, which is probably a nice thing for them each year to sort of to measure themselves against. So I probably, if they didn't win Christmas, I get the feeling, I'm not sure Aldi would be that fussed about it either. But I think they probably, in terms of effective sales ads, I would say they probably will win again.
Well, the Lumen article about who won Christmas showed that they got the most attention on the front end. So let's see if that links to profit. Ubiquity would suggest that attention does lead to profit. So we'll find out.
We will see.
Maybe we'll edit this bit out if they plummet. We'll have to edit this bit out otherwise.
If they fall down a planet, then we have to go. Well,
so if you're listening to this bit, basically you were right.
Exactly. Well, but it's also like it's, and everyone will sort of say it's a yin and yang thing. So there'll also be a point where we'll sort of say, actually, you can't optimize that further. You need to do something very different because we're so used to that now and it becomes kind of wallpaper. But I don't think we're there yet.
No. Okay. Cool. So what's next for you then? 2025, what are you going to be up to? You're looking for potentially some more brand gigs for your...
I'm always looking for more gigs. I'm available for podcasts and any interviews.
Weddings, bar mitzvahs.
Weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs. I've actually officiated a couple of medal weddings, which is quite good fun. So that's a small sideline, very small. 2 weddings so far. But no, I'm in the new year. It was quite exciting for me because me and my wife decided to sell our house. So we've sold our house. Haven't found a new house to move into at the moment. So I'm agile. So we've been doing some house sitting, which is quite exciting, in the Seychelles, which is very exciting.
Oh, wow.
I know that was a.
If you're going to house it, that's where to do it.
That's a good place to go. Yeah. I see. So we've enjoyed doing that. And so it's quite nice because it's allowed me to have a bit of freedom to not necessarily dive into the next sort of thing. I'm quite interested in projects or more collaborative stuff. I mean, there might be this, I think, set up on my own. I won't ever say I'd never go back to working for a big organization again, like for the right kind of role that pulled in all of the elements that I've worked in. I just haven't really seen that yet. So in the meantime, providing some kind of either some short-term support, even like category management work is a lot of stuff I've been doing more recently, working with Hasbro. It's fascinating working in the toys and games category. We were talking earlier on about before we came on about a load of in-store activity in the confectionery aisle at Sainsbury's. There's lots of stuff that was happening. People saying it was quite loud and confusing and so on. And not being someone that normally go into a toy shop and go into a toy specialist store, it's fascinating to see that. I mean, it's an assault on the senses being in a toy shop these days. I see what is available, and then looking at pricing and navigating and all of that part of it. So that's been an interesting thing to be looking at. So sometimes it's helping organisations with their report. As I said, building stuff in Power BI just to try and do some data storytelling to understand performance and so on. And then, things, media, insight, that sort of thing. Yeah. I am available. I may not be available while this comes out. You could ask.
Absolutely, yeah. You could always ask the question. Find you on LinkedIn. Indeed. Matt, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. So our very first guest on the podcast, and now 90-something or maybe 100, who knows by the time we publish. But thank you so much for being on the podcast. Always a pleasure, never a chore.
Thank you.